my sources have told me that new head coach Luke Loucks is doing exactly what we thought he needed to do and exactly what I think he intended to do. And really, probably the strength of the hire is that you're dealing with a younger coach who has a ton of connections, who will have the energy to get into the community, will have the energy to do the sit downs and the handshakes and the dinners and the lunches and make the phone calls and send the emails and be a part of the larger fabric of the community. And that includes reaching out to the wealthiest of Florida State supporters and business owners to ensure that you have some sort of reasonable NIL budget that goes above and beyond the $1.2 million that you've been allotted, which is paltry compared to what many other programs have to spend on basketball talent. I like that from day one, Luke said, look, I know I'm not going to outspend Duke or North Carolina or Kentucky or, you name it, right? Many of the SEC schools. I'm not going to outspend them for the Cooper Flags of the world. We're not going to be able to get those guys. We don't have $3 million laying around to give to one player. That's not going to work. So I'm going to have to find value-added guys. I'm going to have to find guys that kind of will help make up the style of play that I want to promote, that will have an interest in working into what I can give them, which is obviously access to an awful lot of player development programs within the NBA. Obviously, my expertise in how those organizations are run, along with my connections to a lot of those organizations, a lot of those coaches, a lot of those evaluators, and a lot of, frankly, assistants as well and agents. So he's going to have to tap into those resources, and he's going to have to tap into extra money that he is able to raise through whatever shared vision he can sell to those that care deeply about Florida State. And there are plenty of people out there who I think maybe we're not always reached out to, we're not always connected with, we're not always made to feel special. There was a very small group that made up the support for Florida State basketball in the past. And I think you could get away with it for a very long time when the system was different than the one that is run now. What draws and succeeds in college basketball now is different than it was 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago. And so I think the younger you go, which they did, and the more connected you go, and the more, I suppose, community involved and engaged you go with your coaching hire, the better off you are. There may be drawbacks. There are drawbacks to some of that. Inexperience coaching at this level is one, and it's a trade-off. It is a huge trade-off that you say, well, for what Luke lacks here, he might possess here, and we hope the marriage of these two things work out in time, that he ends up sustaining something of excellence and has a chance at a second contract, and Florida State's program begins to buzz. And at that point, you have a little bit more money in the coffers. We get out the other side of the situation that Florida State finds themselves in, which is, again, dumping huge amounts of money into facilities, into football, into the coaching staff, into NIL for football, you name it. Obviously, football only facility, stadium, lawsuit, all of it. When you get out the other side of that, hopefully by then, Florida State basketball has become something that the university feels strongly about investing in because they've had success on the court. But in the interim, you have to have a coach who's doing what I hear took place over the last several days since the hire, and that is the reaching out and the securing of funds from places that maybe in the past weren't always the ones that you could utilize for that sort of resource money. So now hearing that over the weekend, learning more about where this program is headed financially, learning more about where this is headed in terms of potential, the raising of money deepens the pot is a better way of saying it, and gives you a chance. We're going to hear about these coaching hires to make up his staff. I am told that this is going to be a staff full of recruiters, guys who have great connections. And basketball, it's crazy. It's long considered to be before the modern era where now you can openly pay for play. basketball was always considered the dirtiest of sports. And there were just so many tentacles and connections and webs and AAU. And, I know this guy in Atlanta who's friends with this guy here, and he'll steer you players from this school, which is a powerhouse AAU program. Oh, you got to know this guy in South Florida. You got to know this guy in the Midwest. If you can connect the dots there, maybe everybody works together and they all make a little bit of money on the kickback from the agencies and all that. That's how it all worked. You got to have somebody who has those connections. And now you can just do it on the up and up. And I think this is probably Luke's strength, is that those connections hopefully pay dividends here as he also works hard to put together this staff and announces what that's going to look like. I already know some of the names. You're also going to have somebody there that's within, a really good basketball operations guy. You're going to need somebody within the program there to help run things behind the scenes, that shares your vision, that gets it, that understands. I think that's in the process of taking place. So we hit the ground running with the new basketball coach. This is the sort of buzz and enthusiasm you would hope to hear about after a hire. And it didn't take long, and I was hoping that it wouldn't, because you don't have long. And Luke referred to that in his press conference, noting that, look, the portal doesn't wait on anybody. You got to get moving here. And on a day in which we start turning our attention back to football, it's nice to know that behind the scenes, it does look like basketball is quickly organizing, coming together to try to get this thing turned around. I don't know what will happen in year one. Nobody does. I don't know what kind of players he's going to be able to bring in. I don't know how many of the current players he wants to retain. I don't know how quickly we'll learn with the naming of the staff who's what. But I do know that they hit the ground running this past week and into the weekend, which is really good news.
Well, this was clearly going to be a job that you have to think outside the box in order to succeed at Florida State. You have to. And this is why we wanted somebody who was intimately acquainted with what it is in Tallahassee. And, to me, while Sam Cassell has tons of name recognition and connection to the program, I don't know how in contact he was with Leonard Hamilton and Florida State as a basketball program over the last 10, 15 years to understand, what it would take. Now, Charlton Young, CY, very much would understand and know what it takes to succeed at Florida State. But Luke certainly did. So, to me, the two finalists were CY and Luke.
I agree with that.
For people who were armed with the knowledge of what they would need to do in order to get Florida State to be competitive. And I'm glad that it sounds like that Luke is off to a good start here because you are always going to have to heavy lift in a fundraising department as the head coach. Some coaches hate that so much and are so stubborn that they believe that they can coach their way past a lack of resources. And to a degree, you're going to have to do that here. But you're also going to have to put your salesman hat on. When Luke called donors minority owners, I knew that he was going to prioritize it in such a way that he was going to take it completely seriously. Just that use of terminology is so on point of where we are right now in college sports. I get that the House settlement is going to put you in a place where $22 million is going to get siphoned off and distributed to athletes. I get that we're in that era. But you're still going to have to go outside of that fund, especially in a secondary sport or a tertiary sport like basketball is in the Florida State athletics hierarchy. So that he isn't, excuse me, my throat. If he isn't above that, if he doesn't act like, I'm above all that, we'll have somebody else do that. It is critical that that's the kind of hire you have. Bring in recruiters. It sounds like he's saying to his staff and the operation, I'm going to recruit the money. Y'all recruit the players, and I'm going to coach the players. That is a nice way to handle this. I think that was one of the strengths of Jimbo 1.0. Nearly killed him, and he was a really good recruiter, even when he was talking with just 17 and 18-year-olds and an evaluator of talent. But you could tell. He's like, I'm going to run the operation. Y'all go get me the kids, and we'll figure it out. You have to make decisions like that, because there's no clean path to success here. You have to do something where you're taking on a second or a third job and there aren't enough hours in the day. And Luke is the right age to do that.
Well, I think you're right. And I think it's also important to note, look, when they hired Luke, my view of that situation was that Luke would be the guy that handled all the X's and O's. Some coaches you bring in, they better have a crack assistant, a guy that is an elite X's and O's guy, because the coach is more of a CEO. The coach is running the big picture. Maybe he's doing the recruiting because he's got the name, whatever it might be. He's able to fundraise. But in-game decision-making, obviously, week to week, the game planning, whatever it might be, sometimes you turn that over to an assistant. Then there's the opposite. The head coach, that is the guy. The head coach that is, I am an X's and O's guy. I will scout. I will do the scout for every opponent. I'll call all the plays. They're in game that we're going to run. I've got this. You just do a good job of finding me some players, damn it, like you're describing. Or you just do this, this, and this, whatever it might be. So Luke was always going to be the guy coming off an NBA bench, having coached NBA, being the head coach in an NBA summer league. You can't do that if you don't understand the game. They're not going to listen to you. These are pros. When you're a player development guy, you're in with coaches watching film. The X's and O's, especially when you're doing it when you work for freaking Steve Kerr, and then you're working in Sacramento, and come on, who are we kidding? So Luke was always going to be the X's and O's guy, which is good to hear. Right? Get those other guys doing whatever else. My coach can handle the X's and O's on game day.
What's interesting to me is that it just in this situation where Florida State is, do you go get a bunch of salesman types for assistant coaches that can recruit players, like your Ferrari salesman incentive a woman, like somebody who's fast talking, smooth. They go, man, you're good. Or do you get instead guys who can really evaluate and scout? Because I wonder, you're going to have to find these guys, the ones that are going to fit here, the ones that are going to fit under a certain price point. And yes, you're going to have to recruit them, but what type of operation it's a $1.7 million budget for his staff,
right,
like his whole operation. It's not like that's the assistant salary pool, and then you've got this other thing for basketball operations. I think it's 1.7, totally encompassing the operation.
Yeah, the kit and caboodle, yeah.
Right. Well, scouting has to be a big part of that, because those top flight 4- and 5-star kids from the On3 rankings, you aren't getting those guys. So where do you find those ones? Is that going to be Luke's job because of his connections in the industry? Or do you bring in an assistant or two that understand how to go mine for and find those kids? And then maybe one of the other assistants is the one that can close and go get the kid.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and we'll learn more in the coming days. And these are conversations that I want to have personally with Luke.